All right, so you're here because you want to like really get to the bottom of things, right? Not just skimming the surface, but
Yeah.
like actually understanding how things
Yeah.
work.
You want that solid grasp on the concepts without getting, totally lost in the jargon.
Exactly, and that's what we're all about here.
Mm.
Today we're going to take a deep dive into something that's really at the core of how we learn, especially in those super important STEM fields. I'm talking about relational reasoning.
Yeah, relational reasoning.
Right.
It's a fascinating ability. Think of it as like your brain's superpower for spotting those hidden connections.
Okay, I'm intrigued already.
It's all about perceiving similarities and differences, the ones that really make a difference, and then using those to build up meaningful patterns from the information you're taking in.
So it's not just about seeing the pieces, it's about understanding how they fit together, the relationships between them.
Exactly. And you're probably already using it all the time, even if you haven't consciously labeled it as relational reasoning.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So why is this so crucial for academic development? We hear a lot about STEM education being vital for tackling all these huge societal challenges. How does relational reasoning fit into that? It's like the foundation, you know?
Yeah.
The ability to see these underlying patterns, it's absolutely essential for how we learn and develop intellectually. And this is especially true in fields like science, technology, engineering, and math.
Right, those STEM fields where the problems you're trying to solve often involve connections that aren't so obvious at first glance.
Exactly. They demand you go deeper.
And for this deep dive, we're drawing from a really insightful academic article, and it focuses specifically on relational reasoning within STEM education.
It's packed with great insights.
Yeah, it is. And our mission today is twofold. First, we want to really grasp why this skill is so vital for learning and progress in STEM. And second, we want to understand what relational reasoning actually looks like in action. How does it manifest?
Right, let's break it down. So to start this whole exploration, the article kicks off with a discussion of something called the model of domain learning, or MDL.
MDL. Okay, so what is that exactly?
Think of it as a map. It's a theory that basically outlines the path we take to become experts in a particular subject. It looks at how our knowledge, our interest, and our learning strategies all kind of evolve along the way.
So like a roadmap from novice to expert.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, the article points out something really important. It says that this whole journey to expertise relies on certain fundamental cognitive abilities that we kind of bring to the table.
We're not starting from scratch.
And relational reasoning is highlighted as one of these core strengths. It's like the engine that powers our ability to learn effectively, to deepen our interest, and to apply smart learning strategies.
Okay, so it's not just about the steps in the MDL, it's about what allows us to take those steps effectively.
Exactly. Relational reasoning, it influences how efficiently and how effectively we can navigate those stages on that path to becoming an expert. Now, the article makes a really useful distinction between relational thinking and relational reasoning.
Okay, now that's interesting. I'm guessing there's a difference between just thinking relationally and actually reasoning relationally.
Yeah.
So what is it?
You got it. Relational thinking is more of an unconscious process. It's that automatic pattern recognition that our brains are doing kind of in the background all the time.
Like running on autopilot.
Yeah, think about a baby recognizing their favorite lullaby that's picking up on relational patterns based on the rhythm and melody, but without a whole lot of deliberate effort.
Right. It's that immediate gut level recognition of something familiar.
Exactly. Now, relational reasoning that's more deliberate, it's when we intentionally work to identify patterns, especially in new or complex situations where our existing knowledge isn't quite enough.
So it's like actively engaging your mind to dig deeper.
It involves consciously analyzing the information in front of you and trying to figure out those underlying connections or distinctions.
So relational thinking is that quick, almost instinctual recognition and relational reasoning is when we really roll up our sleeves and use our brains to understand the relationships we're seeing.
Precisely. And the article, it highlights 4 key ways that we engage in this more deliberate relational reasoning. It talks about 4 specific types of patterns that we're often looking for.
Okay, lay them on me.
Analogies, anomalies, antinomies, and antitheses.
All right, 4 big words that probably deserve a little unpacking. So let's start with analogies. How does relational reasoning work through analogies?
Good place to start. Analogies, they involve recognizing when 2 seemingly totally different things actually share a similar structure underneath.
Like seeing the common thread even when the surface details are totally different.
Exactly. The article gives this classic example. It talks about describing a teenager's messy bedroom as a trash dump.
Okay, I can see where they're going with that.
The objects themselves are completely different clothes and school books versus, garbage and whatnot. But the analogy, It highlights that shared pattern of disorganization.
It's not about the stuff itself, but the way it's arranged, or rather disarranged in this case.
Yeah. Exactly. It allows us to understand one thing, the bedroom, in terms of another thing, the trash dump, by zeroing in on that common underlying structure.
That's a good example. Another one that comes to mind is comparing the cockpit of an airplane to the dashboard of a car.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've got all these different controls and displays designed to manage these complex systems. The elements themselves are different, but the functional relationship between them, it's analogous.
It's about seeing that functional echo between two things that might not seem alike on the surface.
Absolutely. All right, so moving on to the second form, recognizing anomalies. What does that word bring to mind for you?
Well, I'm thinking something out of the ordinary, something that doesn't quite fit the pattern, something unexpected.
You got it. Anomalies are those discrepancies, the outliers, the things that deviate from what we normally anticipate.
Like a red flag.
In a way, imagine a scientist looking at a set of data and they encounter a data point that just totally doesn't align with their hypothesis.
Or like someone living way, way beyond the average life expectancy.
Exactly. Those are anomalies. And what's so fascinating is that these deviations, they can often be the most informative pieces of the puzzle.
Because they challenge our assumptions.
Right.
They could point to something new that we haven't considered before, or maybe even a flaw in our current understanding.
They're like clues telling us, hey, something unexpected is going on here.
So anomalies are all about spotting those inconsistencies that can lead to new discoveries or a revised understanding.
Precisely. All right, now let's tackle antinomies. This one deals with clear-cut categories.
Like black and white situations.
Mm,
Either scenarios.
exactly. Antinomies involve making those categorical distinctions where something either belongs to a specific category or it absolutely does not. There's no in-between.
No gray area.
The article uses the example of something being either alive or dead, a very fundamental binary classification, or a number is either prime or it's not. There's no middle ground in these determinations.
So it's about drawing those really clear boundaries that help us define things.
This kind of reasoning, it's crucial for establishing clear boundaries and definitions. It helps us create order and structure in our understanding.
Right. It's about those fundamental distinctions that help us make sense of the world.
Absolutely. Okay, now for the final form, we've got antitheses. And here we're talking about recognizing opposition, but not in that strict either-or sense.
So it's about degrees of difference rather than absolute categories.
Exactly. Think about concepts like hot and cold, tall and short, good and bad. These are all antithetical pairs.
They're opposites, but there's a spectrum in between.
Right, they exist on a continuum. Something can be warmer or cooler, taller or shorter, better or worse. And the article really emphasizes the relative nature of these comparisons.
Meaning what's considered tall depends entirely on what you're comparing it to.
Precisely. A tall molecule is on a completely different scale than a tall building. So
Yeah.
that context is key. And this understanding of relative differences, it's super important in many areas of STEM.
Because things are always being compared and contrasted.
Exactly. All right, so we've got these four forms: analogy, anomaly, antinomy, and antithesis. And they all give us different ways to make sense of information by looking at relationships.
They're like different mental tools for dissecting and understanding the world around us.
That's a great way to put it. And the article argues that understanding and being able to use all four of these forms of relational reasoning, it's especially critical for learning and development in STEM.
Okay, so why the emphasis on STEM? Are these forms of reasoning more important there than in other fields?
Well, there are a few reasons. First off, a lot of the research that's been done on relational reasoning has been conducted within STEM contexts, using problems and scenarios that are specific to those fields.
So STEM has been a good testing ground for exploring this kind of thinking.
Exactly. Now, another reason is the way STEM subjects are typically taught and learned. It often demands strong relational reasoning skills. Think about all those textbooks packed with diagrams, graphs, equations, and of course text. To really grasp a concept, you need to be able to see how it's represented across all those different formats. You need to connect the words with the visuals, with the data.
You're constantly translating, connecting different representations of the same idea.
Precisely. And another crucial aspect of STEM learning is dealing with those pre-existing misconceptions that students often bring to the table.
Right, like those intuitive but incorrect ideas about how things work.
Exactly. Relational reasoning, it's essential for comparing those misconceptions with the accurate scientific explanations and understanding why the scientific view is more valid. It's about seeing the differences in those underlying relationships and principles.
So it's not just about memorizing the right answer. It's about understanding why another idea might be wrong based on the relationships involved.
Exactly. It's a deeper level of understanding. And then there's the inherent abstractness and the vast scales that we encounter in STEM, from the tiniest subatomic particles to the age of the universe.
We're talking about concepts that are hard to wrap your head around.
And relational reasoning helps us bridge those gaps by finding those relatable points of comparison and contrast. Using analogies to make the unfamiliar more tangible.
So those analogies we talked about earlier, they become really important tools for grasping these abstract and sometimes mind-boggling concepts.
Absolutely. And then finally, we can't forget about the critical societal need for skilled STEM professionals. These are the fields driving innovation and tackling those big global challenges. The journey to becoming competent in these areas, it's demanding. And strong foundational cognitive skills like relational reasoning, they're essential for supporting students on that path and building up a truly robust STEM workforce.
It's about setting students up for success in these vital fields, and it all comes back to relational reasoning as that fundamental building block.
It all starts there.
Mhm.
Now, the article, it also briefly mentions how researchers actually study relational reasoning in STEM. What are some of those approaches they use?
Yeah, I'm curious about that. How do you go about researching something like relational reasoning?
Well, the article mentions a range of methodologies. There are in vivo studies, which look at how relational reasoning happens in natural real-world settings, like observing students as they're problem-solving in a classroom.
This is seen in action in the wild.
Exactly. Then you have in vitro studies, which involve more controlled experiments in a lab setting, where researchers can manipulate specific variables to see how they impact relational reasoning.
So more controlled observations.
Then there are in silico approaches, which use computer models to simulate how relational reasoning might work.
So using technology to model the process.
Precisely. And finally, you have in recordo studies which examine historical data or records to understand how relational reasoning has been applied in the past.
So looking back to see how this kind of thinking has played out in history.
Exactly. It's a multifaceted approach trying to understand this complex cognitive process from all these different angles and using different tools.
And it makes sense that you wouldn't just rely on one method.
It's about getting the full picture. Now, one last thing to remember about these four forms of relational reasoning analogy, anomaly, antinomy, and antithesis, they don't operate in isolation.
They work together.
They often work together in this really dynamic way as we're trying to understand something new. You might start by drawing an analogy, then you encounter an anomaly that forces you to refine your understanding. And that might lead to a clearer antinomy or a better grasp of those antithetical relationships involved.
So it's not like you just use one and then you're done. You might use them all in combination.
They're like different tools in a mental toolbox that we can use to tackle complex problems.
All right, so let's bring this back to our listener who's tuned in today, because they're keen on learning effectively and understand those intricate subjects. How can this knowledge about relational reasoning actually benefit them in their everyday lives?
That's the key question, right? So by becoming aware of these different ways that your mind naturally seeks patterns through similarities, differences, categorical distinctions, and degrees of opposition, you can become a much more active and strategic learner.
So it's about harnessing that natural ability.
Exactly. When you're faced with new information, especially in those technical or scientific areas, consciously ask yourself, what is this similar to? What stands out as unusual or unexpected? Are there clear either classifications at play? And what are the key contrasts and how do they relate to each other?
It's about taking a more deliberate and intentional approach to learning and using these different lenses of relational reasoning to really probe deeper and make those robust connections.
By intentionally applying these different forms of pattern recognition, you can sharpen your ability to learn to retain information and to really grasp those complex ideas. And this isn't just limited to STEM fields. It applies to any area you're curious about. It gives you a framework for making sense of the world.
It's a powerful way to approach learning. So to wrap up our deep dive today, we've explored the idea of relational reasoning, that core ability to spot meaningful patterns through similarities and differences. And we've seen how it's a fundamental skill for academic growth, particularly in those crucial STEM fields.
And we've unpacked the four key ways that this reasoning takes shape. By recognizing analogies, anomalies, antinomies, and antitheses.
And understanding these four forms, it gives you those powerful tools to navigate all the complexity of information and to build a richer, more nuanced understanding of the world around you.
It's about seeing the world in a new light.
And on that note, here's something to ponder as you go about your day. Think about a recent situation where you learned something new. Can you identify which of these forms of relational reasoning you might have instinctively used? And how might consciously applying the other forms deepen your understanding even further? It's a fascinating way to look at how we learn and how we make sense of everything around us. Thanks for diving deep with us today.